Hello and welcome. I am J.W. Wallace, and this is my presentation for the paper I submitted, Systematic Review of Weather Observation and Forecast Resources Available to General Aviation Pilots, which is in support of the WinMap NASA University-led initiative. So first, a bit about WinMap. So WinMap is Weather Intelligent Navigation Data and Models for Aviation Planning. It just got started up last year. It's a 5-year initiative to develop and address emerging needs in real-time weather forecasting to improve low-altitude aircraft operations, focusing on unmanned aircraft operations as well as urban air mobility are the two main use cases being looked at. It will integrate drone data collection to build and feed models to provide real-time forecasting. Our group within WinMap is the Systems Integration Group, and we are currently in the process of identifying observation and weather gaps as well as pilot needs, and we have developed a survey to identify those needs, and we are conducted this systematic review to inform that study. So we use the PRISMA method to do a review of journal articles on general aviation pilot and weather interactions. PRISMA is the preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analyses. You basically come up with keywords, you put them through those keywords through different search engines, gather all of that data up, which usually is going to be title, abstract, publication date, journal, etc. For each of the papers. Then you can put it into, what we did was we used RAN, which is a systematic review app. We removed the duplicates here. Oops. We removed the duplicates, and then we screened all of the papers, roughly 1,000 papers. Got down to 120. There were 2 reviewers for that screening process. The 120 selected were both included by myself and Dr. Fala. And then I accessed each of those last 120 for full text eligibility, and came down to 24 papers. The 24 selected, we grouped into 3 themes: education, technology, and pilot factors. As I was doing the full text accessing and reviewing, I noticed that there seemed to be like clumpings of focus, like this group of people would focus on this area, or like there would be this sub-focus. And I figured that looking at things in this way would provide a bit more informative of a review and allow me myself to break it down more and better focus on the survey needs and address those things. So first, education. The reviewed papers suggest that pilots need to be educated on new technologies, as would be expected. The primary focus of that paper was NextRad. Additionally, new technologies have been found to be useful in the training of pilots. However, there is some hesitation about that because they don't want pilots to use electronic flight bags or other new technologies and then not be able to fly with old technologies. And there's also concern about the efficacy of weather safety seminars in similar training. There was one study which did an analysis of pilots who had weather accidents and looked into their experience, their age, whether or not they had attended weather safety seminars and other ground school sorts of things, what level of certification they had, etc., and found that weather safety seminars didn't really tend to correlate well in either direction. So that's a little disheartening. Technology. This was the largest group of papers, like 11 of them. Display technology was one of the most focused on in this subset. So how you display your weather information, what colors you use, if you change that, how does it affect pilots, other sorts of things like that. Overall, there was no clear recommendations like, okay, you should use these colors for this, or like given a sort of graphic design manual for the display symbology. But it was more generally recommended to look into additional feedback methods like auditory warnings or tactile feedback. A bit more new sort of developing technologies are the digital copilot. There was a study of a digital copilot which was shown to reduce cognitive loads on pilots by sort of assisting pilots in their flying duties. Of more interest from the wind map and weather perspective, there was a risk situation awareness tool developed to assist pilots in navigating around convective weather. So it was trained, or the algorithm was programmed to be able to identify flight paths based on, I believe it was NEXRAD data, and identify the safest route, and it was shown that pilots with it tended to choose the safest route versus just choosing on their own. In terms of wind map, I think it's interesting what options that has with developing the models and forecasting, and just the high level of data that wind map will hopefully be able to provide. It could make such tools like the ISAP there that was developed even better and more useful. Pilot factors. This was a bit more interesting. I've never flown before. I've never really been around general aviation or pilots at all before starting this research. So it's interesting to get to know from this side of, and like the psychology side, especially what research has been done and what sort of is the profile of pilots. So generally, it was found that a lot of the pilots who tended to crash, or there was a review of crashes due to convective weather, and in most cases it was found that the pilots had violated the FAA separation minimums. Additionally, a study found that pilots had two cognitive biases, which are generally negative with respect to weather, and when there was a follow-up study to attempt to debias the pilots, they were resistant to the simple debiasing techniques attempted. In terms of the pilot factors, there's lots of focus on like pilot needs and why pilots make mistakes and get into weather-related accidents, and trying to find those factors. There wasn't much focus on what pilots need or like what they would want from potential future weather products. That could be because it is more of a product-oriented thing, and this is more of an academic review. But that sort of focuses on what the survey is supposed to address. Speaking of the survey, so we developed the survey to identify general aviation pilots and UAS operator weather needs, and we are sending the survey out to both populations with nearly identical questions, aside from some sort of like, what do you fly, what like weight class UAV do you fly, those sorts of things are different. But in general, from this review, we found that there was little focus on weather product awareness in the papers reviewed. This is probably, I'm guessing, because it's just assumed that pilots know what's available to them. In terms of looking at the pilots versus UAS operators, it's going to be interesting to see whether UAS operators do have any exposure to like METARs and different sort of aviation-specific weather products that they may not, I would assume they wouldn't know about. I don't know. Additionally, pilot weather has been studied, but little focus on what weather elements, hazards in particular pilots care about, whether it's wind, icing, temperature, wind shear, all sorts of different rain, etc., that they might care more or less about so that we can try and focus on that. Additionally, research on pilot risk minimums has been done, but we will also be including that as part of the survey. Yeah, so take our survey up there, up there. There's a QR code that will take you to it, and if you could please send that to your friends who fly UAVs or general aviation aircraft, that would be great. And thank you. So, just want to acknowledge this work has been funded by NASA, Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate, is the grant number, is also part of the AON lab at OK State, which Dr. Fala is starting. And I would like to thank Dr. Fala for encouraging me to do this. And thank you. Thank you all for listening. Have a good day.